Stand in Naples today, and you're in Italy's third largest city. 3 million people fill the metropolitan area. Mount Vesuvius looms over the bay. Pizza was invented here. Tourists photograph the waterfront, the Castel Nuovo, and the narrow streets of the historic center, but walk those narrow streets, the Spaccanapoli, that cut straight through the old city, the grid of perpendicular lanes, and you're walking on a street plan laid out by Greeks 2,500 years ago. Neapolis, the new city, founded by Greek colonists around 500 BC, it became one of the few cities in Western Europe that never died. While London was abandoned for 150 years after Rome fell, while Paris shrank to a fraction of its size, while most of the Western Roman Empire reverted to rural villages, Naples remained urban, walled, populated, and connected to trade networks spanning the Mediterranean. By the year 1000 AD, when most of Europe was feudal and rural, Naples was still a functioning city of perhaps 30,000 people, with stone buildings, a harbor, city walls, churches, and a duke who ruled independently while maintaining ties to the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople. This is the story of how a Greek city survived everything: Roman conquest, imperial collapse, barbarian invasions, and the Dark Ages, and never stopped being a city. Greek origins: the city that Greeks built. To understand Naples in 1000 AD, you must understand that it was never originally Roman or Italian. It was Greek. In the 8th and 7th centuries BC, Greek city-states sent expeditions across the Mediterranean to establish colonies. Southern Italy and Sicily became known as Magna Graecia, Greater Greece, because Greek settlements there became so numerous and prosperous. Around 740 BC, Greeks from Euboea established Cuma on the coast north of what would become Naples. Cuma became the first Greek colony on the Italian mainland, and one of the most important Greek cities in the West. The Greeks from Cuma then established a settlement on an island in the Bay of Naples, naming it Parthenope after the siren from Greek mythology. This early settlement occupied the small island of Megaride, the site where the Castel dell'Ovo now stands. Around 500 to 474 BC, these same Greeks established a new, larger settlement on the mainland adjacent to Parthenope. They called it Neapolis, New City, to distinguish it from Parthenope, which became known as Paliopolis, the Old City. Neapolis was laid out according to Greek urban planning principles. The city followed a Hippodamian grid, planned straight streets intersecting at right angles, creating rectangular blocks. 3 main east-west streets, decumani, were crossed by numerous north-south streets, cardines. This grid pattern, established by Greeks in the 5th century BC, is still visible in modern Naples. The Spaccanapoli, the street that splits Naples, follows the line of ancient Lower Decumanus. The Greeks built their city on elevated ground above the harbor, with defensive walls enclosing the urban core. The city faced the bay, its harbor, providing access to maritime trade routes connecting Naples to other Greek cities in Sicily, mainland Greece, and across the Mediterranean. Greek Neapolis had temples, an agora marketplace, theaters, and residential districts. The population spoke Greek, worshipped Greek gods, and organized their civic life according to Greek political traditions. The city was governed by magistrates elected by the citizen body, following the pattern of Greek city-states, Roman conquest, and Greek persistence. In 326 BC, during the Second Samnite War, Roman forces besieged and captured Neapolis. The city came under Roman control and became part of the expanding Roman state. But Rome treated Neapolis differently than most conquered cities. The Romans recognized Neapolis's strategic importance, its harbor, and its Greek cultural prestige. Instead of imposing full Roman institutions, Rome granted Neapolis the status of civitas foederata, a federated city with a favorable treaty. This meant Neapolis retained significant autonomy. The city kept its Greek language, its Greek civic institutions, its own laws, and its own magistrates. While officially part of the Roman world, Neapolis remained culturally Greek in ways that many other Greek cities in Italy did not. Wealthy Romans came to appreciate Greek culture, philosophy, literature, and learning. Neapolis, with its Greek heritage, mild climate, and beautiful bay setting, became a fashionable resort for the Roman aristocracy. Emperors and nobles built villas around the Bay of Naples. Virgil, the Roman poet, lived and wrote in Naples and was buried there after his death in 19 BC. The city grew and prospered under Roman rule. Roman infrastructure projects improved the region: roads, aqueducts, harbor facilities. But Neapolis maintained its distinct character. Greek remained the primary language even as Latin became more common. Greek festivals, theaters, and athletic games continued. The city retained its Greek street grid, its Greek architectural traditions, and its Greek civic identity even as it was integrated into the Roman Empire. This cultural duality, politically Roman but culturally Greek, would prove crucial to Naples's survival. While the city was part of Rome's political and economic system, it maintained cultural connections and traditions that allowed it to adapt when that system collapsed. Urban layout in the first millennium AD. By the year 1000 AD, Naples occupied essentially the same footprint as the ancient Greek city, with walls enclosing the urban core. The city walls, built and rebuilt over centuries, enclosed roughly 125 hectares. These walls had been constructed originally by the Greeks, expanded and reinforced by the Romans, and continuously maintained and repaired through the Byzantine and early medieval periods. The walls were built of tuff, the volcanic stone quarried locally, and brick, standing approximately 8 to 10 meters high with towers and gates at strategic points. The ancient Greek street grid remained the organizing principle of the city. The three main decumani ran east to west: the decumanus superior, now via Anticaglia and via della Sapienza, the decumanus major, now via dei Tribunali, and the decumanus inferior, now Spaccanapoli. These broad streets were intersected by narrower north-south cardines, creating the rectangular block pattern. This street plan was not merely preserved from antiquity, it was actively maintained and used. The streets were paved with stone, with drainage channels. Buildings lined the streets, their walls built directly up to the property lines, creating continuous street facades. The harbor at the foot of the city remained the economic heart. Ships docked at piers and wharves extending into the bay. Warehouses lined the waterfront, storing grain, wine, olive oil, and other trade goods. The harbor connected Naples to maritime trade networks that, despite the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, continued to function across the Mediterranean. At the highest point of the city stood the cathedral complex and the bishop's residence, the religious and administrative center of Christian Naples. Churches occupied sites throughout the city, many built on the foundations of ancient temples or earlier Christian basilicas. Unlike most medieval European cities that grew organically with winding streets, Naples retained the rational, planned character of its Greek origins. Walking through Naples in 1000 AD, you would navigate a street grid that had been laid out 1,500 years earlier and would still be recognizable 1,000 years in the future. Architecture and building materials. The architecture of Naples in 1000 AD reflected layers of history: Greek foundations, Roman construction, Byzantine influences, and early medieval adaptations. Building materials came primarily from local sources. Tuff, the gray volcanic stone, was quarried from deposits created by ancient eruptions of nearby volcanoes. This stone was relatively soft and easy to work, but hardened when exposed to air, making it ideal for construction. Brick was manufactured from local clay. Timber came from forests in the surrounding region. The older structures' walls, some temples converted to churches, the aqueduct were built of Roman concrete and brick, often incorporating tuff blocks. These massive structures had survived centuries and continued to function. Churches dominated the architectural landscape. The Cathedral of Naples, dedicated to the Assumption of Mary, occupied a site where earlier Christian basilicas had stood. The current structure was being rebuilt and expanded in the 10th and 11th centuries, but portions of earlier buildings remained incorporated into the complex. The cathedral was built in the Romanesque style emerging in this period, with thick walls, rounded arches, and solid construction. Numerous smaller churches and monasteries dotted the city. San Giovanni Maggiore, Santa Restituta, San Giorgio Maggiore, and others served as parish churches and monastic centers. Many of these churches preserved Byzantine architectural elements, mosaics, marble columns salvaged from ancient structures, and decorative programs influenced by Eastern Christian artistic traditions. Residential architecture consisted primarily of multi-story stone buildings. The ground floors typically housed shops, workshops, or storage, with residential quarters above. Buildings shared walls, creating continuous blocks. Roofs were tiled with terracotta. Windows were relatively small, with wooden shutters. The urban fabric was dense. Buildings crowded together within the walls, with narrow alleys between structures. Courtyards and small gardens existed behind buildings, but open space within the city was limited. The population density was high compared to the rural landscape surrounding the city. The architectural character was distinctly urban and Mediterranean: stone buildings with tile roofs, narrow streets creating shade, churches with bell towers rising above the rooflines, and a visible continuity with the ancient past. Population and governance. Naples in 1000 AD had a population estimated at 25,000 to 40,000 people, making it one of the larger cities in Western Europe at a time when most of the continent was rural and cities were small. The city was ruled by a duke, the Dux Neapolitanus. The Duchy of Naples had emerged from Byzantine administration of southern Italy. Originally, the duke was appointed by the Byzantine exarch in Ravenna to govern Naples on behalf of the Eastern Roman Empire. But by the 9th century, the duchy had become effectively independent, with the duke's position becoming hereditary within powerful local families. In 1000 AD, the ruling duke came from a succession of families that had held power for generations. The duke governed from a palace within the city, maintained the walls and defenses, administered justice, collected taxes, controlled the harbor, and conducted diplomacy with other powers: the Byzantine Empire, the Lombard principalities, the Papal States, and increasingly, the expanding Norman presence in southern Italy. The duke was supported by a landed aristocracy, families who owned estates in the fertile Campanian hinterland and maintained urban residences in Naples. These nobles owed military service to the duke and formed his advisory council. The church wielded enormous power. The Archbishop of Naples, whose cathedral stood at the city's heart, commanded spiritual authority, controlled extensive church properties, and influenced political decisions. Monasteries and churches owned lands, collected revenues, and provided social services. A merchant class engaged in maritime trade formed an important part of the urban population. Merchants dealt in grain, wine, olive oil, textiles, and luxury goods. Ship owners controlled vessels that connected Naples to ports across the Mediterranean, Byzantine territories, Muslim Sicily and North Africa, and other Italian coastal cities. Craftsmen and artisans, stonemasons, metalworkers, potters, weavers, bakers, and others practiced their trades in workshops throughout the city. Many crafts were organized by families, with skills passed from father to son. The lower classes included laborers, dock workers, servants, and the poor. These people worked for wages or subsistence, living in crowded quarters, and dependent on the urban economy and charitable distributions from churches. Unlike rural feudal territories, where most people were peasant farmers bound to the land, Naples retained an urban social structure with diverse occupations, monetary exchange, and a functioning market economy. Daily life in a survivor city. Daily life in Naples in 1000 had combined ancient Mediterranean urban traditions with medieval Christian culture. Most people woke at dawn. Church bells marked the hours, calling the faithful to prayer and structuring the day. Many attended morning mass at neighborhood churches before beginning work. The harbor was the economic engine. At sunrise, fishermen returned with catches from the bay. Merchants prepared ships for departure or unloaded cargo from arriving vessels. Dock workers hauled goods to warehouses. The harbor master's officials collected taxes on trade. The waterfront was noisy, crowded, and smelled of fish, tar, seawater, and the goods being traded. Markets operated in designated areas, particularly around the forum area that had been the ancient agora. Farmers from the surrounding countryside brought vegetables, fruit, grain, and livestock to sell. Bakers sold bread, wine, and olive oil. Vendors offered their products. Fish markets sold the morning's catch. Workshops lined the streets. The ring of hammers from blacksmiths' forges mixed with the clatter of looms from weavers' shops. Potters shaped clay vessels. Stonemasons carved blocks for construction. These crafts operated in the open air or in ground floor workshops that opened directly onto streets. Food was typically Mediterranean. Bread was the staple, baked in communal ovens. Vegetables, onions, garlic, cabbage, beans were common. Olive oil was used for cooking and lighting. Fish from the bay provided protein. Wine, produced in the surrounding vineyards, was drunk diluted with water. Meat was less common for most people, reserved for special occasions or the wealthy. The wealthy ate far better fine bread, roasted meats, game birds, imported delicacies, wine, honey-sweetened desserts, and dishes prepared with expensive spices from the East. Public baths, common in the Roman period, had largely disappeared, replaced by private bathing or washing at home. Churches had become the primary public gathering spaces, replacing the forums and theaters of antiquity. Entertainment included religious festivals, processions, and feast days. The church calendar structured the year with celebrations of saints' days, Easter, Christmas, and other holy days. These occasions brought communal gatherings, special foods, and temporary breaks from labor. Streets were narrow and often dark, with buildings blocking sunlight. Sewage and waste disposal, where primitive waste was often thrown into streets or cesspits. The smell of a medieval city was powerful. Disease was common, and epidemics could devastate the crowded population. Yet compared to rural life, the city offered opportunities: trade, crafts, interaction with diverse people, and access to churches, markets, and the wider world through the harbor, trade, and the maritime connection. Naples' survival as an urban center depended fundamentally on its continued participation in Mediterranean trade networks. While the Western Roman Empire had collapsed in 476 AD, trade across the Mediterranean did not entirely cease. Naples maintained commercial connections to the Byzantine Empire, which still controlled much of the eastern Mediterranean. Ships from Naples sailed to Constantinople, carrying goods and returning with imports. Trade with Muslim territories was significant. After the Arab conquest of North Africa and Sicily in the 7th–9th centuries, Naples engaged in commerce with Muslim ports, despite being a Christian city. Pragmatic commercial interests often trumped religious divisions. Naples imported goods from the Islamic world and exported Italian products in return. The primary exports from Naples and its hinterland included wine from Campanian vineyards, olive oil, grain when harvests were good, salt, preserved fish. Textiles imports included grain from Sicily and North Africa when local harvests failed, luxury textiles, silks from Byzantium and the East, spices, precious metals, and coins, manufactured goods unavailable locally. Currency circulated in Naples: Byzantine gold coins, solidi, local silver coins, and later Arab gold dinars. This monetary economy distinguished Naples from much of Western Europe, where barter dominated rural areas. The Duke controlled the harbor and collected customs duties on trade, providing a major source of revenue. Wealthy merchants accumulated capital and formed a class with interests in maintaining Naples's urban character and commercial connections. These trade networks were what kept Naples alive when other cities died. As long as ships arrived and departed, as long as goods were bought and sold, the city retained its economic function and its population, religion, and cultural identity. By 1000 AD, Naples was thoroughly Christian, but its religious culture reflected its complex history. Christianity had reached Naples in the early imperial period. According to tradition, Peter himself visited the city. By the 4th century, Naples had a Christian community and a bishop. The city's patron saint was San Gennaro Stiti. Januarius, bishop of Benevento, who was martyred near Naples during the Diocletian persecution around 305 AD. His relics were preserved in the cathedral, and the miracle of his blood, believed to liquefy on his feast days, became central to Neapolitan religious identity. The cathedral and numerous churches preserved early Christian and Byzantine artistic traditions. Mosaics, frescoes, and architectural elements showed Eastern Christian influence. Greek liturgical practices persisted alongside Latin ones. The city's religious culture blended Western Catholic traditions with Byzantine elements, reflecting Naples's position between Eastern and Western Christianity. Monasteries played crucial roles. Benedictine houses following the rule of Saint Benedict maintained centers of learning, copied manuscripts, provided charity, and owned extensive lands. These monasteries preserved literacy and learning during the early medieval period. The language of the city was complex. Greek had persisted longer in Naples than in most of Italy. By 1000 AD, Latin was the language of administration and the church, but spoken dialects mixed Latin, Greek, and emerging Italian vernacular. Many educated Neapolitans could read Greek, Latin, and speak the local dialect, a trilingual culture rare in Western Europe. This cultural complexity Christian, but with Byzantine influences, Latin, but with Greek heritage, Western, but connected to the East, gave Naples a distinct identity and flexibility that aided its survival. Defense and survival strategies. Naples survived the collapse of the Western Roman Empire through a combination of defensive strength, diplomatic flexibility, and strategic positioning. The city walls were the primary defense, maintained continuously from ancient times through the medieval period. These walls were formidable, built of tuff and brick, standing 8 to 10 meters high, with towers at intervals and gates that could be closed and defended. The walls made direct assault costly. Naples's position on a promontory above the bay provided natural defensive advantages. Approaching from land required crossing the Campanian plain, giving defenders warning. The sea approach could be defended by the harbor and by ships, but military strength alone did not ensure survival. Naples pursued sophisticated diplomatic strategies, playing larger powers against each other and maintaining useful relationships with all sides. When the Western Roman Empire fell and Ostrogothic kings ruled Italy, Naples acknowledged Ostrogothic authority but maintained internal autonomy. When Byzantine forces under Belisarius reconquered Italy from the Ostrogoths in the 530s-540s, Naples opened its gates to the Byzantines. When Lombards conquered much of southern Italy, Naples maintained independence by acknowledging Byzantine overlordship while conducting practical relations with neighboring Lombard principalities. The Duke of Naples sent tribute to Constantinople when necessary, but governed independently. Naples played Byzantines, Lombards, Arabs, and later Normans against each other, maintaining freedom of action while avoiding conquest. The agricultural hinterland sustained the city. The rich volcanic soils of Campania produced abundant grain, wine, and vegetables. Unlike cities that depended entirely on long-distance trade, Naples had a productive agricultural region that could feed the urban population even when trade was disrupted. The combination of walls, diplomacy, strategic position, agricultural resources, and trade connections allowed Naples to survive when so many other cities did not. Why Naples survived when others fell. The question is not merely what Naples was in 1000 AD, but why it remained urban when most of Western Europe had ruralized. Several factors explain Naples's unique survival. First, continuous commercial connections. Naples never lost access to Mediterranean trade. Even during the worst disruptions of the 5th-7th centuries, ships continued to arrive and depart. As long as trade functioned, the city had an economic reason to exist. Second, Byzantine connection and protection. Unlike cities in Gaul, Britain, or northern Italy that were entirely cut off from the Eastern Roman Empire, Naples maintained ties to Constantinople. Byzantine naval power in the Mediterranean provided a degree of protection and connection to a functioning state. Third, agricultural productivity. The volcanic soils around Naples produced reliable harvests, providing food security. The city wasn't dependent solely on long-distance grain imports as Rome had been. Fourth, defensible position. The walls, the elevated site, the harbor all made Naples difficult to conquer. Invaders found easier targets elsewhere. Fifth, cultural adaptability. Naples's Greek heritage, its multilingual culture, its ability to work with Byzantines, Lombards, and Muslims. This flexibility allowed it to navigate political changes without catastrophic disruption. Sixth, religious continuity. The church provided institutional stability, social services, and continuity of administration, even when secular government changed. Naples did not thrive in the early medieval period as it had under Rome, but it survived, and survival was remarkable enough. Standing in Naples today, in the Spaccanapoli or along Via dei Tribunali, you're walking streets that have been continuously occupied for 2,500 years. The street grid laid out by Greeks in 500 BC is still there. The volcanic tuff blocks quarried by Romans are still visible in walls. The churches built in the early Middle Ages still stand, their Byzantine mosaics still glowing in the dim interiors. Layer upon layer of history compressed into a city that never stopped being a city. While London became ruins, while Paris shrank to the La de la Cité, while most of Western Europe returned to small agricultural villages, Naples remained. Through the fall of the Western Roman Empire, through barbarian invasions, through the early medieval period that we call the Dark Ages, Naples kept 30,000 people living within its walls, maintained its harbor, conducted trade, preserved literacy, and functioned as an urban center. The Naples of 1000 AD was not the prosperous Roman resort of antiquity. It was smaller, poorer, more dangerous, and more constrained. But it was still a city, still urban, still connected to the wider Mediterranean world, still maintaining traditions and institutions that went back to its Greek founding. That survival was not inevitable. It required walls maintained over centuries, ships that kept sailing when trade routes collapsed elsewhere, diplomatic skill to navigate between powers, agricultural productivity to feed the urban population, and cultural resilience to preserve urban traditions when ruralization swept most of Europe. Modern Naples, with its 3 million people, its UNESCO World Heritage Historic Center, its vibrant street life and ancient churches, sits on top of all those layers: Greek, Roman, Byzantine, medieval, and everything that came after. But the foundation was laid 2,500 years ago by Greek colonists who built a new city on the bay, laid out a street grid that would last millennia, and created an urban community resilient enough to survive everything history threw at it. Neapolis, the new city, is old beyond measure. It survived by never dying, by maintaining urban life through centuries when cities were supposed to disappear. That makes Naples not just ancient, but extraordinary, a Greek city in the shadow of Rome that outlasted the empire and refused to vanish.